All right, welcome to Database Development Design. Again, this is RBCC. This is Dr. Larson. This is our SQL lesson for week 7, which will be temp tables and views. Okay, so a temp table, or a temporary table, as it's called, has many uses. You can store immediate results, intermediate results of a query, so you can look at it later. Break down larger queries so that you can make it more manageable, especially when you're dealing with very large data sets. Sometimes it's easier to break the queries into steps to allow the computing power of your database to handle it. Because often, if you work for an enterprise, you're only going to be given so much computing power per user. So you want to make sure that your queries are clean. And sometimes the best way to do it is break them into smaller groups. Reduces repeated calculations. If you have a subquery or calculation that's used multiple times, just put it into a temp table. That way you don't have to sit there and do this massive calculation compute job every time. You just have it sitting there ready for the other tables to use. And it will allow you to handle large data sets in batches. When you're processing large data sets, like in an ETL operation we talked about earlier, temp tables can store the data temporarily. This allows batch processing and reduce memory pressure on the system. It's think about staging tables. Now, temp tables is a term used. You'll also hear volatile tables, other things. Each kind of database has their own version, but the whole idea of just a temporary table is what we're going after here. Just there we go. That's the back there. Drive me nuts. Okay. So the biggest thing about temp tables is number one, they are temporary, meaning the second you leave a session, they're no longer viable, but they're viable within the session, so it allows you to, work with them. So I'm just going to jump ahead and show you real quick how to do it. Well, actually, let's go through these. Then I'll show you how to do one real quick, and then I'll show you how it works. Okay. So imagine you have to run a series of calculations on your customer orders data, but your boss is only concerned about electronics and furniture. So they don't really want, And again, let's imagine this data set is for Walmart or Amazon. So it's billions of records. So if you want to, by cutting down to just 2 departments, you're probably cutting it down in a fifth of the data set you're trying to deal with. So you've definitely made it a lot easier. So instead of having to use a where clause on all departments every time you write out a query, we can just make a temp table that only stores that information. Okay. So the way we do that is in SQL Server, which again, in SQL Server, we use what is called, the language we're teaching you is called T-SQL, is the actual language. Okay. Transact SQL. That's Microsoft's version language. Everybody's got their own versions. I'll get a list of them for you later. This is the version you're learning here. The command we use is we say between our select columns and our from, before the from, we put a phrase called into. And then we use a pound sign or a dollar sign. Okay. This, or hashtag, I guess not dollar sign, pound sign or a hashtag. And that tells SQL Server this is a temporary table. So we have the select statement, which everything else you should be able to read. Select from customer orders where department is electronics or department is furniture. And now this is the only new thing, we're into temp 1. Okay, the main thing is when you do this, you can't run this more than once because it's going to say there's temp 1 already exists. So this statement's I'm putting it into temp 1. This creates the table and populates it at the same time. So let me show you real quick here within here. Let's go ahead and I'm going to get a new query going here for us. And it's the same thing. We'll say select star from custom orders where department in furniture, or what's the other one we said? Electronics. Okay. So this is the same thing, except I'm using an in statement now instead of or, because we did over in statements. So here we go now. We're down to, you can't really see it, but I've got 42 records. You might have to take my word for it to get the screen to, nope, wrong one. There we go. So we have 49 records, which, if you remember, originally this set has over 100 records. So we've already filtered it down now. Another thing you would probably do in real life, not here, is in real life, these tables tend to have, if you're dealing with data warehouse, these tables tend to have 30, 40, sometimes 200 or 300 columns. you'd probably want to filter down your columns. So we'll just stick with this. So what we can do now is I can take this and I can say select into temp one, okay? And you don't have to call it temp. You could call it dog. I mean, it don't matter. Whatever you want to call it whatever you want. And but you need the hashtag to let you know that's there. Now it runs. It says 49 rows were affected. Now I can sit here and I can say, from here I can say select star from dog one, okay? And you're going to see it's going to do the exact, it's just going to roll it the same. You can treat it the same. I can even have a where clause where payment is cash. I can treat this just like I can a table. So just the only difference is that pound sign front. Now the pound sign makes a big difference here, and notice this. Now watch, okay? I open a new query window and I say select star from dog one, and I get an error, invalid message, dog one. Dog one only exists within this session. So like from here, I can open a new window and go to customer orders because that's a real table, okay? Customer orders is a real table, but dog one is not because dog one is a temp table. But I want to run this, and then I want to go back here, and just to show you, I'm just gonna run this again. I'll change it up so it's a little different this time. I'll say credit, so we know where I'm actually dealing with the table, and I'll run it, and it'll work. It'll work. Well, there was no credit, I guess, in that example, huh? Let's go back to cash. We'll just see what's in here. Let's just go. Is there not a single credit? Oh, credit card. I'm sorry. That would be my problem. See, if I do credit card, it'll work. All right. So there you go. So and the beauty of this. I know it seems weird. Why would you not want it? Well, if you're in the same session working, you're fine. But the goal is that way when you log out, it erases itself. You're not, because the problem is if you keep building tables. If you're like me, you forget you built them. They're orphaned, and you end up getting an email once a quarter by the DBAs yelling at you. You got a bunch of tables you got to clean up. So using temp tables is a lot easier. It solves that problem. So let's go back to our slide deck here. So, and we fixed, sorry. This is not the world's best video system, but hey, I'm not a video editor. I'm a computer guy. All right. So anyway, we create our temp table. And another example here, we go in here, we say, select from temp. Again, you can treat the temp table just like you can any real table. That's what I wanted to show you here. So you can do, you can treat it however you would another one. You can make more than one temp table. You can make as many temp tables as you want, okay? So temp tables can help deal with complex queries. Imagine we're asked to return only vet visits from owners who only own cats. So people who own both a dog and a cat need to be excluded. The simple statement could be where this could be, honestly, if you think about it, it can be a little complex. I'm going to break two tables. I'm going to create a table, temp one, which is only our feline people, and temp two, which is only our canine people. So what we should have there is using temp tables, we can create the smaller tables using only feline records and only canine. Then we can answer our original question, who owns a cat, by now using a subquery. Remember our subquery. So we can sit there and say, select star from temp one, which is our cat. We're owner in select temp two, okay? And that's actually not what you want. We're say we're owner not in select temp two, and that would return only people who own cats, okay? So versus, people who own dogs and cats. So this would return only people who own dogs and cats. If you put a not in, you would get, this would include. So the correct syntax would be, just so you got it, it would be say select star from temp one. And again, this is an example why using temp, I would call this, in real life, you'd probably call it like cat owners. I would call the query cat owners. Let's make it easy. So temp one is now cat owners. And then we'll say where owner is not in, then we say select star from, let's imagine this table we created was called dog owners, okay? So if you are in the cat owners list and your name appears in the dog owners list, you're removed. We don't want you there. But if you're in the cat owners list and you're not in the dog owners list, that means you only own a cat. So that's how we solve that problem, okay? Sorry about the mistake in my code there. I'll fix that. All right, so that's temp tables. it's really kind of it. I mean, there's a lot of use for them to get. I would highly recommend getting used to them, especially for using things like breaking down very difficult queries. But I mean, in the long and short, the good thing about temp tables is you can build a table. They are tables. The data is stored there, so they're very fast, but they're temporary. They get blown away the second you're done, so they're not a problem later in life. Okay, you don't have to worry about going back to clean them up. All right, now we can do the same thing to create a table if you wanted to. Instead of a temp table, you can create a new table like this. Okay, so and it would create a table. Notice there's no pound sign to tell it. So if I go here, because first of all, if you notice, let me get back to so you can see my screen. Sorry. So if I go here, first off, let me refresh this, go to my tables. There is no dog one, okay? However, if I did this and I said same thing and I made it, I'm just gonna get rid of this. Made it dog, I got rid of the pound sign and I go, it'll work. Now watch when I go to tables here and I refresh. There it is, there's dog. So I can select star from dog. And I can, just so you saw it's still there too. I would say select star from dog one, still there. Dog one's still here. So I can select from that one as well. So they're both there. But if I go over here, dog one will not work still. Dog will work, however. All right. One important caveat for this insert though into, you can only do this the first time. So watch this. If I come back and try to make this again, run this query, I'm gonna get an error code saying dog one already exists in the database. Even though you can't see it over here, it still knows it exists. Same thing with dog. So you would have to drop that table first, which we'll get into later, but the easiest way to drop a table is just to say drop table, then the name of the table. But problem, keep in mind when you do this, you will delete everything. So this is a point of no return. That's gone. Now I can rerun this and it'll work. All right. So that's just a little bit on temp tables. Let me go ahead. Let's go ahead back and versus tables. And but again, my tables still exist. So my dog exists and that table is going to still be there unless I go through and delete it later. All right. So let's go back to our deck. So that was tables. So tables versus temp tables is temp tables delete that are only used in the one session and they're deleted when you're done. Whereas tables, they stay until you get rid of them. All right. Third option to look at is what's called a view. Now, a view is nothing but a stored query. So the big issue with temp tables and tables is, especially when you're dealing with massive data sets, is that you are making a copy of the data. So if you've got 200 million records in your one table and you make a temp table out of it, now you have two tables with 200 million records or wherever you filter down to. So you're still storing data. A view, on the other hand, does not store data. It stores only the query. It only needs enough storage to store this piece of code right here, which is next to nothing. Text is pretty small. So when we use a view, is normally when you have like a complex join, you have to use a lot, for a lot of your work. Sometimes it's easier just to make it into a view. So that way people don't have to go through and build the join out each time. So in this case, I'm getting my student name, my subject, and my name. This is my tutoring. So this is from tutoring where I joined a student. And then I also joined a tutor to get all the information. You should remember this from our join lesson here. This should make sense to you. If you read this and it doesn't make sense, go back and watch the join lesson again. But this will give you the results here. So what if I create this as a view, if I said create view, tutor info as, and then I run this, then I just select star from tutor info and it runs just like I'm running all of this. So all I have to do in the future is just write this little part right here. Okay. So again, it runs just like tutor view. So again, the syntax is simple enough. Create view, name your view as what your query in here, and then it comes out. All right. Again, views like your temp table, like unlike your temp table, a view like a regular table sticks around. In fact, you'll be able to find views if you create one. I just went here just for fun and let me go through. I created a view called doggy1, and from here, select dog from dog from that table we made. And again, I can run this like a view, select star from doggy1. You can hear my idiot doggies in the background, I'm sure, right now. Our neighbor's got the nerve to walk down the street. How dare you? So it works as a view. Now you can find your views down here. When you're looking at your database, you'll see under tables, this thing called views. If you look in there, there's the views. Now here's the cool thing about views in here is you can right click on them and hit script view as create to, new window, and you'll see how the view was created. So when you have a nice complex query and you're trying to see how it was made, it's always saved in the view. I'll give it a second to do its thing here. Sorry, it's a little slow. But you can see there's how my view was created, this little section of code right here. All right. Then again, there's the Go. Microsoft loves its Go. I don't teach it because nobody else uses it. All right. So back to here. Which ones, they are stored. You can't find them. And you do have to, if you want to get rid of them, you do have to delete them, but they do not store data. So they're not, they don't take up much space at all. So most people don't worry about views too much. All right. So here we go. So the examples here. Tables, the pros, available to all users, non-volatile. That means they will still be there when you've turned the computer back on. Cons, they take up disk space. They're often orphaned or forgotten, which means you build them, you use them for something, then you forget all about them, and they sit there just taking up space. Temp tables don't affect other users. Other users can't see them. They're volatile. They self-delete after use. They can't be used by other users is the problem, and they're volatile. It's a con, I guess. And pros, they can be used by all views can be used by all users. Only take up space needed to store the script, but they can be slow. Because the big thing about a table, like let's say you did a table with a lot of calculations. That's the temp table you built. When you go to run it, it's just going to run fast because all the calculations have been done. If you create a view with all the calculations, every time you run the view, it has to run the whole query again. So if your initial query that builds your view or table is very slow, you're probably better off building a table, using that table and getting rid of it than you are with a view. Because the views have to, every time you run a view, you have to run that entire query again. Okay. So just another nice thing to look at here, tables persistent, index supporting, physical storage, good for large data sets. They have full control and they're of security, and the concurrency is high, meaning multiple people can use it. Temp tables are temporary session based. They are limited with their indexing support, stored physically, good for short-term calculations. You can't apply security factors to them, but they're only used by the one user, so that kind of limits the security. And there's possible conflicts with concurrency. Persistence, as far as views goes, there's no storage. You're not storing anything until you materialize it. Indexing support, there's no indexing support unless you have a materialized view, which that's beyond the scope of this class. Data storage, not stored, it's logical only, meaning all we're storing is the query. Can be slow unless you materialize it again, and then can limit data exposure, security, and the concurrency is high. All right, that's it for this one. I'll see you back for the lab walkthrough.